after covering the topic of measures, let's now focus on nature-based solutions. These cover a suite of actions and policies that harness the power of nature to address some of our most pressing challenges. 1/3 of climate mitigation is needed to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement, and these can be provided by nature-based solutions. We will hear from an esteemed panel of scientists and the perspective of a local chief executive about the nature-based solutions that they're working on and opportunities for the private sector. So to introduce our first speaker, let us welcome the Head of Office and Philippine Program Manager of Wetlands International, Dr. Anadel Cabanban. Dr. Anadel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. I'm given this privilege to talk about nature-based solutions and the stories we have from the field, from the river basins of Agusan River Basin, Cagayan de Oro River Basin, the Tacloban Seascape. I have two questions basically to answer. One is to give the stories that we have in the field, and also the opportunities for private-public partnership. There are many types of nature-based solutions, and one is this type, the integrated risk management, and I do not have time to explain this, so let's just give the story. This lady is from indigenous people of Tagoluan in Agusan River Basin. They suffer from erosion on the slopes of the mountains or the hills that they are farming in. And this is also because of logging and other activities. So we propose to have contour farming to reduce the erosion. And this is basically an intercropping of native trees and agricultural crops. So by having this contour farming, it reduces the risk to erosion as well as the loss of their livelihoods. And you can see the times change in the vegetation in the forests in these two pictures. The other framework is integrated river basin management, and we have this example in Cagayan de Oro River Basin. And this example is implemented under the Ridge to Coast Rain to Top project. This photo is a photo of the indigenous peoples in Bukidnon. They group together and work together with the private sector. So indirectly, we work with the community in implementing watershed management or watershed reforestation. The reforestation method that Hinelaban Foundation, this is the CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility arm of the plantation owner, is actually of two parts. One is there's a socioeconomic component where it involves the preparation of a community garden that provides them some food during dry seasons and during difficult times, and also the development of a community farming Adlai. This is a very special grain that is good for diabetics. And you can see the pictures there. The second component is the actual reforestation. This only happens after the establishment of the community garden and the livelihood development with the community, either it's coffee or the adlai. And first there is the killing of the cogon grass that you can see in this picture in the lower quarter of the frame. And then once the cogon grass is eliminated in the landscape, then that's the time that you plant the native trees, the native fruit trees that will hold the soil and restore the soil. The other story that we can tell is about the restoration, the piloting of a restoration in a seascape in Tacloban. And you know the story of the Yolanda surge. And we piloted this with an abandoned fish pond with a community living in Nulatula particularly. And you can see here the young man, a member of the community, standing beside the growth of mangrove trees in this abandoned fish pond. So the growth is substantive after 2 years. And an opportunity for partnership is available in all these examples, pilots that I have just mentioned. And another example is very near to us where we are right now, and this is in Manila Bay. Several years ago, the governments of the Philippines and Netherlands came together to come up with a management plan for Manila Bay. And this is towards basically preparing for the future. The migration or the movement of population from Metro Manila will be northwards. The development socioeconomically will be also northwards. Therefore, we have to prepare for this. But we also know that the area north of Manila Bay, shown here, is already suffering from environmental threats. There's subsidence due to over-extraction of water for agricultural use, and there's also sea level rise. However, the rate of subsidence is greater than the rate of sea level rise. So we must prepare for this. And right now, the area in the hatch area here in this photo is only about 100,000 people living in it, but that's also the very sensitive area. But behind the hatch area, there are many people living there, and they're already suffering from riverine flooding as well as coastal flooding. So we must do something. We have recommended it also in the Manila Bay Sustainable Development Master Plan that we incorporate nature-based solutions. Here, under the Building with Nature program of Wetlands International, we have identified areas that are suitable for the establishment of adjacent mangrove or mangrove aquaculture. That is the zone with red here, where we still can continue aquaculture, but we also can restore mangroves on the waterway side of the mangrove fish ponds. And the area or zone that is in green is the area for establishment of mangrove greenbelt. And then the areas in front of that is to basically for the restoration of intertidal mudflats, which are important for migratory birds, as well as seashells or gastropods or mussels that we like to eat. And we currently are working with several members of the private sector, fish pond owners, to pilot adjacent mangrove aquaculture. And we hope that this will prosper in the next few years. And we really hope that many private sectors will invest in any of these potential projects that we are proposing as nature-based solutions here in Manila, as well as in other parts of the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ana Del. Also joining us is the Honorable Mayor of the Municipality of Del Carmen, Surigao del Norte, Mayor Alfredo Matugas Coro II.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to first thank WWF and SM for organizing this forum. So let me start with trying to present first our island, the island of Siargao. Click, click, click. No click. No click. Oh, what happened? Ano ba ito? How do you bring it down? Ayaw. Okay, anyway. Siargao is one of the 2021 World's Greatest Places and the #1 island in Asia by Condé Nast last 2021. And we are a protected landscapes and seascapes as per INAIPAS Act of 2018. I was supposed to show you how beautiful the island is before we were devastated by Super Typhoon Odette last December 16, 2021. So we're about to have our 1-year anniversary of the devastation. And let me start by sharing that nature-based solutions impact to poverty incidents. Because of our program on nature-based solution, prior to that, we were recognized as the illegal mangrove cutting capital and the illegal fishing capital of the Philippines to become a champion of environmental and good local governance. And with that, it means the significant reduction of poverty incidents by 32% from 69.9 in 2010 to 2018. So, however, on December 16, as I said earlier, Super Typhoon Rai and Odette made landfall in the municipality of Del Carmen, our municipality, and destroyed our homes, our livelihood, and definitely our dreams. However, a day after the landfall of Super Typhoon Rai, we realized that we had very few casualties, as we have established good disaster risk reduction and response protocols, including climate change adaptation. The weeks after, we continued to provide food, we supported livelihood recovery, and rehabilitated shelters. To summarize our experience, we invested 10 years to prepare ourselves to battle a 4-hour storm. Food stability and security were established from the ongoing COVID pandemic to post-Super Typhoon Rai with sound policies and actions for both farmers and our fisher folks. We had previously established forward-looking investments to protect our marine resources with viable supply chain with marine protected areas, the construction of a multi-species hatchery, setting up mariculture platforms, all of which were damaged by Super Typhoon Odette, scaling a social protection mechanism for farmers and fisher folks, and building an integrated fishery market. Currently, we are recovering our community-based ecotourism industry and expanding this opportunity to establish new industries for livelihood. With this, I'd like to invite everyone to visit Siargao. We have now at least 8 flights a day with 3 airlines, Cebu Pacific, PAL, and Sunlight. Our Nowhere to Cover story boasted of boat tours who were previously illegal fishers and illegal mangrove cutters and a community-based ecotourism program employing at least 1,000 families on rotational basis. And to highlight this opportunity of ecotourism is the increased income from 2,000 pesos per month in 2010 to 10,000 pesos pre-pandemic per month. Because of this experience, we know that we could recover, and we will recover better this time. To end, let me say, we are the solution. We are the evidence of how our focus on restoring our ecosystems allows faster and immediate recovery of homes, livelihood, and dreams despite recurring disasters. To end, I call upon leaders of both public, non-government, and private institutions that nature-based solutions is a viable developmental option that will lead to climate change adaptation, food security, and quality of human life. Salamat Karajaw sa Ijo Horot.
Thank you very much to the Honorable Mayor. And last, certainly not the least, the President of the Center of Conservation Innovations Philippines, a National Geographic explorer, author of seminal conservation books, and ecology professor at the De La Salle FEU, Dr. Neil Aldrin Malyari.
Magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Kaya pa ba? Carry bells pa ba? So I'm taking this discourse from a different perspective as well. Our organizations we've had many, too many to count, companies knocking at our doors and saying, we want to do nature-based solutions. Yeah? And that's why I suppose my talk this afternoon is all about perhaps a cautionary tale of what nature-based solutions are not, as opposed to what they are. To many respects, we see a lot of these companies, riding the bandwagon and wanting just to earn, as opposed to, healing the biophysical, our biophysical Earth, and so on. The pandemic obscured our vista just before COVID hit us. There is a global call that there's a biodiversity crisis and a climate emergency. But because of COVID, our vista of that those two emerging emergencies have been obscured. I'm just coming back from a week-long work with DNR. Expect in the next coming months that there would be things to measure. In this case, DNR is looking at high conservation value areas and natural capital accounts as their battle cry. Previous session was talking about counting what counts, and now in the next few months, DNR will lay down their metrics for counting what counts. And really, when you talk about sustainability and impacts to the planet, if you like, this will be measured against the impacts, primary, secondary, and tertiary, to the ecological function of the area. Is the project jeopardizing basic needs of local communities? And finally, is this putting at risk cultural values, etc.? So at CCI, we work tirelessly to put our science at the helm of conservation and management. As a conservation NGO, our sort of lens is fixed on a high biodiversity scenario. As you see, as you have better biomass, increased biomass, especially for old growth forests, high density forests, there's that element of high biodiversity, and this is where we focus our lens, if you like. Our radar screen is fixed there. Yes, there are many nature-based solutions that are low biodiversity, but maybe we can tweak the way things are being done so that we can achieve a high biodiversity scenario. By the way, the Philippines is one of the mega diversity countries, and our premium is our biodiversity. If you compare land vertebrates alone with, say, Spain, which is 2 times larger than the Philippines, we have 2 times more, or 10 times more. If you compare Philippines with Brazil, Amazonia, 26 times bigger than the Philippines, we have 2 times more endemic species. So that's how important the Philippines is. So bear in mind that we will focus our work on high biodiversity scenario. There are many projects. They might be planting trees or preventing trees from being converted or felled. In this case, when you do avoided deforestation, then you maintain your biodiversity and you prevent further emission. I'll talk about that in a minute. Add some examples of that. The opposite is that, the point that I'd like to make, the reason why we're so fixated on high biodiversity scenario is that we hope and pray that when we do nature-based solutions or projects, that we also focus on irrecoverable carbon. Things, carbon that's tied up with biodiversity, endemic species, our identity as a nation. And most of them are in the tropics in the Philippines. The other flip of the coin is that admittedly, there are places that need revegetation and reforestation and so on. But our hope is that we just don't plant bamboo or do plantations. Revegetating means that we need to increase the biodiversity. Because if we have a low biodiversity scenario, you will have a less resistant and less resilient ecosystem. And I'll talk about that again in a minute. Sinabi ni Mayor Coro, we're about to celebrate or commemorate 1 year of Odette. Nauna lang sa Siargao, a few days later, pumunta sa ang exit niya, ang toll gate ay Siargao, ang exit niya ay Palawan. And I'll show you in a minute. These are satellite images stitched together just before Odette, 2 weeks before Odette. So this is between January 2021 through November 30, 2021. As you can see, almost 90% of this landscape in northern Palawan has dense vegetation. And Odette just happened in just one day, in 18 December, and after that, this is what happened. The damage is more than between 60 to 80%. It's covering more than 400,000 hectares of damage. If you convert that to carbon, we just emitted more than 40 million metric tons on average in just one day. Kina Mayor, I'll show you in a minute. But the point I'd like to make here is that we can talk about standards, yung alphabet soup. We can talk about your nature-based solutions. But most of our ecosystems are under clear and present danger, my friends. 1 year ago, and we've done this analysis for government. And by the way, usually, pagkatapos ng disaster, after electricity, communication, travel is restored, we are back to normal. But often, in our post-disaster response, we do not After the DANA, we do not assess the condition of the ecosystem. At the moment in Puerto Princesa, we are suffering, we're starting to feel shortage in water because most of the rivers have been, most of the forest has been gone, and most of the debris are still trapped, causing some damming in the uphills. Sorry, malungkot. But as a biodiversity conservation organization, we measure what we count what counts. And in this case, I'd like to, just to illustrate to you, the impact of Odette after pre and post, yeah? This is the suitable habitats for this species. This is an endemic species in Palawan. And look at that after Odette. When you amalgamate or you overlay all of these species, you see how these have been fragmented because of Odette. How do we build back from this disaster? Ngayon, balik na yung electricity, but no one is thinking about ecosystem resilience. Our biodiversity is telling that story now. For example, yung rattan, nag-dwindle. Kamusta na yung ekonomiya ng ating mga kapatid na katutubo? Again, this is another example of that satellite image pre-Odette and after Odette. More than almost 100% natural vegetation damaged by Odette. We see a lot of defoliation, nasira, natanggal lang yung ano, but this is, pag nag-usap kami ni Mayor Coro, how do we build back better? Nabalik yung ekonomiya, fine. But what about the ecosystem and the ecosystem services? Our hope and prayer is that we, in this forum and succeeding fora, please put into the discourse, include in the discourse, ecosystem resilience. Not just, your sustainability, in your sustainability report, how do we measure and how do we build back better? So, in other words, our hope and prayer again is that when we think about nature-based solutions, it shouldn't be just about planting trees. It must be nature positive. Think about ways to measure it and show evidence that it has a net positive impact on nature as well. One example of that, speed up. We have a project with MPTC looking at rewilding. And this is going beyond planting trees, but letting nature recover and letting nature being restored. No? What we envisage is that we enhance natural vegetation so that we can reconnect people with nature. There's always a thinking that we are not part of nature. There's a divide between us and nature. And we're hoping that with this project we can change that. We change from, greening, well-manicured, to showing our people from the urban areas what nature is all about. Hindi yung artificial, but really natural, endemic, and native. And we're re-vegetating and rewilding the highways of Calax. So that's work in progress. So finally, we always say this, parting statement is that we will not be okay if nature is not okay. So nature-based solutions should be nature positive and not just counting carbon and earning money from it. It must make sure that we are healing the biophysical firmament or the seas that we have. Salamat, magandang hapon.
Thank you very much, Neil. May I call back on stage our panelists for just a couple of questions for our Q&A. you. Are we all okay to start? Yes. Great. Okay. Coming to the lessons from Typhoon Odette. As it was mentioned earlier, that nature-based solutions must also help in disaster risk reduction. What are the lessons, the hard lessons that we need to learn out of that experience?
Maybe I'll start, no? Wala sa plano ng gobyerno ang disaster response. Disaster response is just about recovering electricity communication. But when we did the green assessment, now DNR just realized, okay, we want to include this in post-disaster because the Philippines is so vulnerable, palaging nandyan yung rhetorics. The hard lesson is that, alam nyo, magwa 1 year na yung we've been showing them the local governments. We've been showing these results. May nangyari na ba? The local government cannot release money to get people to the field and collect the debris because it's difficult. It's not part of their game. It's not part of their what they're used to.
Great.
For me, the hard lesson is that a good environment, a good status of your environment is the best preparation for disaster. If you have a good environment, the ecosystem service, the protection will be there, and also the resiliency of the community will be there because if there is no supermarket that's open, people can glean for food from the environment. Thank you.
Mayor Cora, the survivor here.
Yeah, to go from the perspective of the local government, we want to look at the opportunity, how private sector, because this is, most of our audience is from the private sector. How do you come in and strengthen what we have experienced in Super Typhoon Odette? First, there's really no way that you can plan for a category 4 or 5 typhoon. I mean, it's gonna happen. It's going to happen again and again. So how do we re-strategize business so that everyone will survive, including your markets? One of the things that we were experiencing during the typhoon was that a realization that we are an archipelago, and we often forget we are an archipelago with 7,000 islands. So how do you put supply chain within the archipelago that's supposed to provide food, water, medicine, communication right after a super typhoon? And the only way you can build that is to start building, the mall. The mall to some may look bad, but you have to look at the quality of the building of a mall. It's square, it's resilient, it's affordable from the private sector because they profit from it. At the same time, you need them because they put prices down. And during disasters, it's a way to store food, a way to store communication, so that when something goes wrong, your resilient building can actually recover faster and communicate to tell the world that, hey, we just lost the entire island. Our best experience would be people did not know that the whole island was destroyed because we had to file a report. And how can you file a report if there's no communication? You don't even know, who's going to show up in the office a few days after because you don't know who's missing, who's alive, and you probably half of them are still thinking the same thing. So I think there are a lot of opportunities that we need to tap with the private sector, with the way supply chains are being managed, because we have been managing it from the perspective of everything is okay. But if you try to change the mindset of what's happening now and realities that are happening on the ground, that how do you develop your processes so that it can meet the changing demands of the climate? And therefore, you can continue to do good business. At the same time, the local governments and the community continue to benefit from whatever you're doing before and after a typhoon.
Thank you very much for that take. It sounds like from the opportunities that you presented on nature-based solution that the range is pretty wide as to what an NBS can be. But what care must be put, what care must be given to avoid abusing this term?
To us, it's not just enough to do the right things, dapat din we have to do it right. For example, right after Odette, hindi ko lang sabihin ko sino, they invested on 9 sacks of seeds, flew a helicopter and nagsabog ng seeds sa Puerto Princesa. Is that a solution? No, it's a waste of money. So how do we rebuild back? I mean, not a hard lesson, but what we were inspired by the fact that our survey covered about 500,000 hectares. But we did that because, citizen science was there, and, communities, local communities and indigenous peoples submitted reports of the extent of damage and where these are. So, yun, pwedeng gawin. And the second one, yung pitfall, sana hindi lang plant ng trees. We're seeing lots of regrowth sa Siargao. The challenge is how do we then let nature reclaim its space? How do we rewild? So sana hindi lang tayo greening. Let's move away from that, but from greening to rewilding, I think. So.
Thank you very much. Doc Annabelle?
Yeah, may I just add that indeed there are times that we really do not need to replant mangroves, for instance. That's why we have a project called To Plant or Not to Plant. Sometimes all it needs is just restoring the tidal flow, the exchange of water from the marine environment to the land, and for access also of water, riverine water to the fish ponds, for instance, or the coastal areas. So, yeah, that's one way that we can avoid
Thank you very much.
abusing nature-based solutions.
Yeah, give it time.
May
It
I
will
add-
heal
may I
itself.
add, ma'am?
Yes.
For nature-based solutions, yeah, para siyang brand, I do nature-based solutions. But in reality, for rural areas, nature-based solution is a way to make money. It has to be viewed as a profitable engagement of the local government with the community. That's why in earlier I presented how it impacted our poverty. If your nature-based solutions do not have direct impact on poverty alleviation, then there's something wrong with it. At the end of the day, ang pinakamadali with nature-based solution is, of course, tourism, right? Ecotourism. And as Dr. Malyari has mentioned, we have one of the most mega-diverse countries in the world, but we haven't capitalized on biodiversity as a product. And we tried it, it benefited us. Imagine if there are 248 protected landscapes and seascapes in the Philippines, none of which are really profiting from nature-based solutions. And protected areas are already nature-based solutions. That's why you protect them, because they provide a lot of value to the country. If we profit from these 248 protected landscapes and seascapes, we should not be talking about nature-based solutions anymore, because we are executing it as part of our daily routine. And I think that's the missing factor, because private sector should start looking into these nature-based solutions from existing policies that are already in place, and how do you maximize it so that everybody wins. At the end of the day, we have to maximize nature-based solutions as a way out of poverty. If you build supply chains within the community, you have your mall, how do you supply to the mall? You use local farmers, you use local fishermen at a very good price, and it goes back to the community. And if you ask them to do fishery the right way, and if you support that kind of market, then people will just naturally go into nature-based solutions. It's not rocket science to do nature-based solutions. It's the way how we lived before. It's only a matter of time adjusting to accept that the way we lived before was the right way, and maybe we missed out on something, then we go back to the way we lived before.
Thank you very much for those insights. Last question, your parting shot. What would be your advice to the future Alliance for Climate Action?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, in the SDGs 17, we work together. We work together towards restoring our ecosystems, both terrestrial, marine, coastal, because these are our natural capital for livelihoods, for protection, and for preparation for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have to look at, I think, if I may encourage the private sector, you have to look at local governments and the power it brings. The local governments have a way of, they have the capacity to do corporate functions, which means we can raise funds, we can do municipal bonds, we can loan, but we don't have technical capacity. So if the private sector would work with the local governments on expanding the opportunities that are created in megacities and bring them to rural areas, there's a lot of opportunities we can do to address nature-based solutions, bring down poverty, increase market capacity, and so on and so forth. That is already inherent in the local government code, but that's the most unexplored part of the local government code. And if there's an opportunity in this room for you to move forward, I mean, there's a lot of local governments out there just waiting for the private sector to come in and support them and explore all these opportunities. So I beg of you, there are 1,500 municipalities. There are a lot of opportunities. Most of them live on a coastal area with very beautiful beaches, very beautiful biodiversity. It's just very untapped. Access-wise, we have already a lot of logistics, airports, ports that are already being developed. It's just a matter of bringing expertise of how operations should be done, efficiency in terms of operating so that we maximize profitability for both local government, national government, and the private sector that's coming in. So I hope you explore that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Aldrin.
Sa akin, let's count what counts. We move away from just counting the different activities, nature-based solution activities. So tinatag lang natin yung mga projects, no? I think there's now opportunity to start measuring our impacts. And we cannot measure impacts if we do not agree on how to measure these. So counting what counts. The three magical pillars or trinity na palagi naming sinasabi, it starts with good conservation science. Pag maganda yung conservation science mo, good conservation practice will emerge. And when you have good conservation practice, from that you emerge a good conservation leadership. At the moment, kalat-kalat. So I think that's an opportunity for this forum and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again to the three of you for giving such fresh insights, and a different view to the discussions of today. That concludes our learning session. We hope you've captured some very valuable takeaways to guide in your efforts. Again, a big thanks to our panel.